We know that they have been planning to, in essence, depopulate large areas of the United States. And that also gets into plans for the future.
The fires that are raging literally here in California now, as well as Oregon now. Certainly we've heard what's been happening in Europe, in Russia, in Greenland, in Sweden, Finland, certainly Greece, with people having to run into the sea to escape the flames. It's right out of Athens, near a town in Athens. Vietnam has been on fire, and many other locations. And there's a commonality here. They all have climate action plans. So what does this mean? That they're buying the false science of climate change or global warming and the requirements to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They have all their policies lined up with the false reality of eliminating fossil fuels. They say that climate change will affect increases in extreme heat events, increased air pollution, floods, droughts, wildfires, storms, changes in weather patterns. All the countries have adopted this false plan based on the effects and results of weather weapons.
It's important to note that some of these things are actually, most, if not all, are being engineered. In other words, they're deciding where they want to have a fire and then creating it.
Commonality with all of these assaults, be it fires, storms, tornadoes, too much rain. Many places right now are getting many inches of rain. It's all the acceptance and the approval in all of our cities by our presumed elected officials that have said we agree with the climate action plans, and we agree with all this false science, and we agree that we must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, Carrie, by the year 2050, they want greenhouse gas emissions to near zero or zero. There is no life with that goal. People don't understand what is being discussed. They talk about the threat posed by climate change justifies population engineering, obviously eliminating people. They talk about geoengineering, which is weather weapons, along with reducing consumption-related waste and renewable energy and reducing human fertility rates, is all morally justifiable. Relocating climate refugees. This is what is happening, though, globally. This isn't just only the United States. We're seeing the transition happening in Europe with all the weather weapon assaults. One of the European papers, it says, Europe burns as climate change fuels forest fires and the danger extremes. And they go on to say how the death toll in Greece as wildfires have mounted, and it's a national tragedy. But then they also go on to about what happened in Sweden, and certainly the fires in Portugal last year. We were heavily chemtrailed the days before October 8th of 2017 when the fires here in Northern California erupted, during and after, and that was holding all the smoke here in this area down. We were being basted in toxins, and that was all part of the intentional plan. They're talking about increasing the sales tax here to pay for housing because we have such an enormous displacement of burned out victims.
Yeah, I mean, this is a population redistribution program, I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what's happening around me, when they turn HAARP on in the middle of the night, 3 or 4 in the morning, and then they keep it on until around 5 or 5:30 or 6 in the morning. And they do this often. What that does is that encourages the possibility of earthquakes. So you're not going to just have the fires, you're going to have an increased number of earthquakes as a result of this kind of destabilization.
We're in fact the enemy. And that's obvious because we're being poisoned in every imaginable way and every unimaginable way, from the overhead aerial chemtrailing to weather weapons to toxins in the water, the food, etc. There's no end to the description of the poisonous delivery system, keeping us in a foggy mind so that we're not able to be clear thinking. It's all part of the plan to literally subdue us.
There are so many weather so-called related events going on. These are geoengineered events. These are not due to global warming. These are not due to climate change. All of the global warming and climate change is very much being done purposely with a hand on the trigger to force a world change. And all of this dual-use technology that the military has set up so silently, quietly over the years in the name of convenience, in the name of communication, in the name of all things good for society, when really the dual use includes using all of it as a weapon. And I include the lasers that appear to be hitting California and Greece and other places as ways to activate what is an infrastructure already set up through this wireless revolution we've undergone. The other thing that I think of is the fires and the floods that you've had in Europe. It's been unbelievable. I've watched in horror and recognized very much the signature of secret society, influence, if not utter control over the geoengineering red button to make everyone suffer while they're bringing the chaos that must precede the new world order that they're attempting. And it's all about sacrifice by starting fires and burning people's homes down and forcing people out of their homes that they'll never see again. And of course, now all the bloodhounds are waiting in the shadows to buy up the properties at a cheap price. And the UN Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 program is also waiting to renovate the governance over the communities. And it's all about forcing through chaos the coming of the New World Order.
Remember, we've had a lot of sanctions against Russia since the Ukrainian crisis in 2014. But the ones that will really hurt, if they're implemented, are the ones that try to limit Russia's ability to borrow money from Western banks. The goal is to cut off Moscow's flow of investment money. It won't work. It will cause hardship. And as always, the hardship will not fall on the people we so despise, the people who govern Russia, Putin, his team, the oligarchs, whatever we want to call them. It will fall on ordinary people. In fact, politically, they have the opposite effect. People resent them, the way Washington's treating their nation, and they rally around the Kremlin, whoever's sitting there. The assumption always is Moscow's weak, can't do anything about it. Here are the things Moscow could do and might do. They will start trying to do international trade in anything but dollars, with China, with the BRICS countries, with Europe. There are several American banks in Russia operating. One very big one, Citibank, they might close it down. All our space travel is driven by Russian rocket engines. So they could say, okay, you want to sanction, we're not giving you any more rocket engines. What does that mean? Well, we couldn't go to the International Space Station. We couldn't put into space satellites anymore. Russia can strike back. And the way things are going, unless this stops, it will strike back. We need Russia to avoid a nuclear war and the end of civilization. We need Russia to stop the new nuclear arms race. It's underway. It's dangerous. We need Russia to stop the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We in Russia have the most. If we don't work together to safeguard those weapons, rogue states, rogue actors will get those weapons. Or take the case of peace in Syria. It's within reach. Russia destroyed the Islamic State. Russia wants to bring the United States into a series of agreements that will end the fighting throughout Syria. How can we end the fighting in Syria without Russia, which in effect controls a good part of Syria? So we're playing with fire here.
Mainstream journalism has been so integrated into a propaganda barrage, and that propaganda campaign, at the moment pointed right against Russia, suggests to me that it's the beginning of a kind of another march on Russia, that the surrounding of Russia with American bases, with NATO missiles, the provocations day after day suggest this. There is overall a campaign against Russia. This is a very long campaign, but it's intensified in terms of its propaganda in a way I've never known. I've never known journalism to be so distorted in order to serve this propaganda. When we understand there's an historical pattern, and we're seeing that played out now almost through the propaganda that's presented as news. To simply write down and swallow what governments tell you is the very antithesis of what real journalism is.
For almost 40 years now, Iran has been, from the false narratives that we see in the West, a regime that is illegitimate, that is violent, that is unpopular, that is corrupt, and that is about to implode. And so far, we haven't seen that happen. In fact, the unresolvable paradox here is that on the one hand, Iran is a regime, according to the narrative, that's about to explode or implode. And on the other hand, it's a growing menace to world peace and stability. So it's a growing threat, but it's also corrupt and collapsing. You can't have your cake and eat it too. In Iran, we have different political parties with different political perspectives that argue with each other, that carry out public debates, because that's not the sort of narrative we hear in the West. What we usually hear about Iran is very similar to what we hear about Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, where there are no politics. There's just a dictator who makes the decisions. So in Iran, when we have politics, it's called some sort of internal warfare. In the West, it's called democracy and checks and balances. Well, the Iranian economy is definitely going to face difficulty, and it will continue to face difficulty in the months ahead. President Rouhani, his position is not as strong as it was before, obviously. But he has the legitimacy. He's the president of the country. He was elected. The leader supported him in his recent speech. And of course, there's mismanagement in this country. You have people who protest, and there are legitimate protests, and there are grievances. But on the other hand, there are external forces who have been trying very hard to turn legitimate protests into riots. It's very well documented. It's not some conspiracy, it's a reality. We have the United States surrounding us. You have US troops in the Persian Gulf, you have US troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. You have the United States constantly threatening the country. You have Western countries funding groups that carrying out psychological warfare. The reality on the ground is that Iran, despite the antagonism and despite the hostility that's coming from Western powers, is much more free than any of the US allies in this part of the world. The Americans want to crush the Iranian people. They want to humiliate the Iranian people, but I assure you that Iran will persevere. We've gone through greater difficulties. In the 1980s, when the United States was helping Saddam Hussein, giving him, and the Europeans, by the way, giving him chemical weapons to use against Iranians, we survived. I think across the world, people are recognizing that the United States is behaving in a dangerous manner, using the dollar, using financial institutions as weapons. And this is something that we now see that they're using against Turkey. And that is going to increasingly isolate the United States. Of course, the United States is still a very important power. But what I'm saying is that the world is changing as well.
I think the United States would have to adjust their policies, because how are they going to enforce that? If China and Russia and other countries and India, they do business with Iran, well, how are we going to punish them? You know, we've already been doing a lot of that. What are we going to do? Put more sanctions on Russia? We continue to do that, but eventually that runs out of steam. The warmongers, the people who want sanctions and everything that Russia does is bad, they're really in charge with our media, and they have really basic control, you know, in the Congress. But I think it's tragic what's happening because they have no proof of anything. I don't like dictatorial powers. I don't like sanctions. I think that leads to currency wars. They've already started, and unfortunately those kind of conditions sometimes can lead to a lot more and into some very hot wars as well.
Donald Trump has been mocked for coloring in the American flag incorrectly during a visit to a children's hospital in Ohio. The U.S. president was photographed adding a blue stripe to an outline of the Star-Spangled Banner. Twitter users were quick to suggest Mr. Trump was actually attempting to color in the Russian flag, which is made up of 3 horizontal layers of white, blue and red.
Im Alltag vieler Menschen bleibt oft nicht die Zeit, frisch einzukaufen und zu kochen. Die meisten kaufen in Supermärkten und dort beherrschen Fertigprodukte die Regale. Und da stecken umstrittene Zusatzstoffe drin, über die kaum ein Verbraucher etwas weiß. Vieles dient nur dazu, Lebensmittel nutzbar für die industrielle Verarbeitung zu machen und billigen Zutaten einen natürlichen Anstrich zu geben.
Es geht darum, dass man glaubt, der Verbraucher sei ein Idiot, indem er so lange die Dinge hineinstecken kann, wie man ihm das verheimlicht.
Wie viel hat industrielles Essen noch mit frischen Lebensmitteln zu tun? In der EU werden hunderte Zusätze wie Konservierungsmittel, Stabilisatoren, Aromen, Enzyme, Farbstoffe und Geschmacksverstärker eingesetzt. Zum Beispiel Konservierungsstoffe auf der Basis von Schwefel, die sogenannten Sulfite.
Die Sulfite können bei Allergien eine unheilvolle Rolle spielen. Sie können aber auch dazu führen, dass im Darm Bakterien wachsen, die von Schwefel leben und die dann die Darmwand von innen angreifen, sodass sich Allergene, Krankheitserreger, Schadstoffe praktisch leichter im Körperinneren ausbreiten können.
Für jedes Lebensmittel gibt es zwar zugelassene Höchstmengen für Sulfite und Zusatzstoffe, doch kaum ein Hersteller verrät Genaueres. Deshalb lässt sich nur grob abschätzen, wie viele Chemikalien wir über die Nahrung aufnehmen.
Diese Technologien, die wir heute haben und die dazugehörigen Zusatzstoffe und Additive, erlauben es natürlich auch, das Produkt besser erscheinen zu lassen, als es wirklich ist.
Überall verstecken sich Zusatzstoffe. Käse enthält oft Kalium- oder Natriumnitrat. Speck ist nicht ohne Nitritpökelsalz zu bekommen. Aber auch die sauberen Tiefkühlprodukte sind keine perfekten Lebensmittel. Der Vitamin-C-Gehalt von Gemüse etwa sinkt bei der Tiefkühllagerung um rund 40% gegenüber dem erntefrischen Produkt.
Jede Technologie, mit der ich Lebensmittel haltbar mache, lagerfähig mache, hat natürlich Einfluss auf das Produkt. Egal, ob ich jetzt einen Zusatzstoff zusetze, ob ich das Ganze sterilisiere, also Konservendosen herstelle, oder ob ich tiefgefriere.
Das Erhitzen ist hier die häufigste Konservierungsmethode, auch wenn man Angaben dazu nur selten auf dem Etikett findet. Die Palette der hitzekonservierten Lebensmittel ist groß. Milch, Gemüse und Obstkonserven, Fertiggerichte, Fruchtsäfte. Viele Käsesorten und sogar fast alle Wurstprodukte.
Bei einer Hitzebehandlung werden sehr viele Moleküle, die im Lebensmittel drin sind, zerstört. Sie können an Eiweiße denken, die verändern ihre Struktur, verändern ihre Farbe dann. Vitamine werden zerstört, Farbstoffe werden zerstört.
Seit Jahrhunderten erhalten Joghurt, Salami, Kefir und Sauerkraut nicht nur ihren Geschmack, sondern auch ihre Haltbarkeit von spezialisierten Bakterienkulturen. Seit einiger Zeit setzen Hersteller Bakterienkulturen als reinen Konservierungsstoff zu. Kennzeichnung: Fehlanzeige. So erhält der Verbraucher nur bruchstückhafte Informationen darüber, mit welchen Stoffen und Methoden seine Lebensmittel haltbar gemacht wurden. Und dem Verbraucher bleibt eigentlich nur übrig, frisch auf einem Wochenmarkt einzukaufen, wenn er sicher sein will, wie sein Essen zusammengesetzt ist.
Flavor is what you could call nutritional information. It is nature's language of nutrition, and it's there for a really good reason, because we needed some means of figuring out what was in food before we ate it, by smelling it, and while we were eating it, by tasting it. And that's why we have this flavor sensing equipment, because it tells us what's in our food before it gets here. And if it tastes disgusting, we spit it out, and if it tastes good, we keep eating it. Flavorings, those were these packets of chemicals designed by flavorists to imitate real food, produced in factories and added to food. When you think about it in a state of nature, flavor is the chemical language of nutrition. Flavor is the sign saying, there's nutrients here. Look at what we did. We sliced those flavors off. We dissociated them from their nutrients, and now we put them in whatever we want. People started eating a really high-calorie food, lots of fat, lots of carbs, because it tasted more delicious than it deserved to. This is a food that packs a thrilling nutritional story, but it's a lie because it doesn't back it up with actual nutrients. That is what we have done to our food. We have created delicious food with no nutrition behind it, and that is why we eat so much of it. And not only that, we have robbed flavor from the very food we ought to be eating. Of all these foods we shouldn't eat, if it wasn't for the flavorings, would we eat any of them? Think about soda for a moment. If you took a Coke or a Pepsi and you took away the flavorings, you would be left with a can of soda water that has 12 teaspoons of sugar in it. Would anybody drink that? Think about potato chips. Would anybody eat potato chips if they all tasted like potato? I think they'd eat some. I don't think they'd eat nearly as many as they eat now. We're adding flavorings to basically all fast food because the people who make this stuff know it is so bland, you need to do something to it. We are incentivizing food to be delicious because we've robbed it of its natural essence. We have to stop turning all food into junk food. In nature, the relationship between the way a food tastes and what it brings to your body is inextricably linked. And that we, not only do we manipulate that at our peril, but we can get back. We can put back into food what we took away from it.
The first and key decision, if health is a concern, is moving off of processed food and onto real food. I'm talking about plants and animals in their more or less natural state, or things that are very lightly processed, like pasta or flour or things like that. And those things are still in your supermarket. They're mostly on the periphery of the supermarket. And one way to shop is sticking to the perimeter of the store. That historically is where the produce is, where the meat is, where the fish is, and where the dairy is. Avoid the center aisles. The center aisles are where the imperishable foods, the foods that are immortal, live. And you know, food is alive and it should eventually die. And a food that doesn't, there's something we should wonder about. It's been over-processed, it's been hyper-processed.
One way to tell if a food is hyper-processed is to look at the number of ingredients listed on the packaging. A food that contains fewer ingredients is almost certainly less processed. Also, if we can recognize the ingredients listed, this almost always means the food is less processed. Foods that don't come with ingredient lists, like fruits and vegetables, are usually the best choices of all. Many people are confused by the nutrition labels they see on packaged foods in the supermarket. Some of the healthiest foods in the store, like fresh fruits and vegetables or a fillet of fish, these foods don't need nutrition labels to tell you they're nutritious. So one simple strategy for eating sensibly is to try as much as possible to avoid foods with nutrition labels, because by definition, these are packaged and more heavily processed than fresh foods. Nutrition labels will also often contain a list of vitamins and minerals found in the food, and this can be misleading because added vitamins and minerals don't necessarily mean that the food is healthy. And in fact, some unhealthy foods have added vitamins and minerals because the manufacturers of those foods know that nutrition claims tend to increase sales to the health-conscious consumer. Knowing how to use nutrition labels to compare packaged food items is important. But just eating fewer packaged foods and crowding those out with plant-based foods may be an even more effective way to protect our health. Because so many companies are competing for our food dollars, the marketing of these different variations has become extremely sophisticated. Billions of dollars are spent every year marketing processed food to us and to our children. Also, the more time our children spend in front of a screen, the more likely they are to be exposed to this kind of food marketing. If you have a farmer's market nearby, take your children there. If you have space in your garden or even on your windowsill, plant something that you can later eat with your children. If we choose less processed foods most of the time, and if we go out of our way to find foods that are grown or raised closer to home, these actions will likely have an effect on their future choices.
Hablaba con el frutero, que además es de un puesto ecológico, diciendo de, oye, esto me va a saber a sandía de verdad, porque es que hace mucho que no cato una sandía de verdad. Ni más ni menos que me encuentro con el dilema de probarla y darme cuenta que es lo de siempre. El sabor a pepino, pero no a pepino viejo y bueno, sino pepino de los de ahora. Pura agua, pura nada, pura antiesencia. A mí me sabe todo distinto ahora. ¿Soy yo? ¿Son mis papilas gustativas las que están aquí? ¿O es que los productos han cambiado completamente? ¿Esto es fruto de la globalización? ¿O hay una conspiración como si todo hubiera perdido su alma, su esencia?
Surprisingly, the ideas in man and dolphin struck a chord with American astronomers who were searching for extraterrestrial life.
The possible intelligence of dolphins was of special interest who were interested in extraterrestrial intelligent life, because we wanted to understand as much as we could about what the challenges were going to be in communicating with other intelligent species.
Well, a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it better than your mind. And for the most part, you're going to keep creating the same life. So then people grab their cell phone, they check their WhatsApp, they check their text, they check their emails, they check Facebook, they take a picture of their feet, they post it on Facebook. And now they feel really connected to everything that's known in their life. And then they go through a series of routine behaviors. They get out of bed on the same side, they go to the toilet, they get a cup of coffee, they take a shower, they get dressed, they drive to work the same way. They do the same things, they see the same people, they push the same emotional buttons, and that becomes the routine, and it becomes like a program. So now they've lost their free will to a program. 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a memorized set of behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a computer program. So if you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and we do, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, your life's not going to change very much. Because the same thought leads to the same choice leads to the same behavior. The same behavior creates the same experience, and the same experience produces the same emotion. The part about change is not making the same choices you did the day before, period. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. The body's in the unknown. So the body says, I want to return back to familiar territory. So the body starts influencing the mind, and it says, start tomorrow. You're too much like your mother. You'll never change. This isn't going to work for you. This doesn't feel right. Being in the unknown is a scary place for most people because the unknown is uncertain. People say to me, well, I can't predict my future. I'm in the unknown. And I always say the best way to predict your future is to create it. Not from the known, but from the unknown. And what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What behaviors do you want to demonstrate in one day? I think that's the difference between living as a victim in your world, saying, I am this way because of this person or that thing or this experience. They made me think and feel this way. When you switch that around, you become a creator of your world, and you start saying, my thinking and my feeling is changing an outcome in my life, and now that's a whole different game, and we start believing more that we're creators of reality. The Newtonian world is all about the predictable. It's all about predicting a future. But the quantum model of reality is about causing an effect. The moment you start feeling abundant and worthy, you are generating wealth. The moment you're empowered and feel it, you're beginning to step towards your success. The moment you start feeling whole, your healing begins. And when you love yourself and you love all of life, you'll create an equal. And now you're causing an effect. So when the body wants to go back to its emotional past, and you become aware that your attention is on that emotion, and where you place your attention is where you place your energy, you're siphoning your energy out of the present moment into the past. Because it's saying, well, it's 8 o'clock, you normally get upset because you're in traffic around this time, and here you are sitting, and we're used to feeling anger, and you're off schedule. Oh, it's 11 o'clock, and you usually check your emails and judge everybody. Well, the body's looking for that predictable chemical state. Every time you become aware that you're doing that, and your body is craving those emotions, and you settle it back down into the present moment, you're telling the body, it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind, and now your will is getting greater than the program. It's so important, just like a garden. If you're planting a garden, you gotta get rid of the weeds. You gotta take the plants from the past year and you gotta pull them out. The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant a new garden. I think when people start to understand this, I think knowledge is power, But knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment. Most people then wait for crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis. They wait for loss, some tragedy to make up their mind to change. That's the old model of, waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. My message is, why wait? And you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration.